Welcome to Venture Node. We are a Web3 community of founders who are looking to learn from each other by speaking to people who are currently in the trenches of their own venture. My name is Adrian. I have a background in fintech and have become more involved in the technical side of crypto over the past couple of years. I started this podcast in order to fill the gap in early stage project exposure and learn from some really amazing founders. Join us today with our guest coming from Pogbet. Let's start with some introductions. I guess, Eric, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey, how's it going, everybody? My name's Eric. I'm the founder and CEO of Pogbet, and we are a live streamer betting platform building on Solana.
Awesome. So maybe you can get a little bit into your background. I know you went to Berkeley and you did some pretty interesting things at Berkeley. I saw on your LinkedIn. So maybe you can maybe you can talk about that.
Oh God, yeah. No, I haven't. I don't think I've updated my LinkedIn in a while. I feel like it's interesting. I feel like a lot of Web3 folks have kind of steered clear of LinkedIn, which is something that I personally love, like steering clear. I don't love LinkedIn.
Right.
Um, but back in college, I went to Berkeley, and I was the class of 2020, which was an interesting time to graduate. I actually dropped out after my junior year um, because I raised a little bit of capital and founded a company called Better, which was a sports betting application, which was a lot of fun. And we we were going to launch for March Madness of 2020, and it was that week that if you love basketball, you remember this fondly or not too fondly. Rudy Gobert touched all those microphones in a press conference, and then he tested positive for COVID. And then the NBA just fell apart, and then all the other sports leagues in the U.S. and subsequently around the world stopped. And we are like, oh shoot, we gotta figure something out. And so we had to take a step back and really kind of evaluate everything. But back in college itself, I was studying industrial engineering and operations research. So I was deep into both business and code and a little bit of everything in between optimization, like anything and everything an engineer or a software engineer could get their grimy hands on. And man, it was a lot of fun, but I knew I wanted to get out into the real world and start building stuff. I worked a lot with the Hyperloop team at Berkeley, which was a lot of fun. We were shooting little little capsules down a tube at like 200 miles an hour, which was interesting. And as a college group, you don't have resources to build out extensive, well planned projects, which is very comparable to what a startup feels like at times, where you
Right.
have very limited resources and you just try to make the most of them. And when you're building something that's supposed to go that fast and be safe, there were a lot of hurdles that we had to overcome. But I definitely feel like it prepared me a little bit for getting into the startup world and just getting used to like, hey man, you have no money, no resources, like go figure your stuff out. And
Oh yeah.
it was a wild experience.
Yeah, I saw at Berkeley you worked on the Hyperloop project and then also like a Mars suit uh, project as well. And I mean, those are just two like crazy. I mean, they both sound super cool. And I definitely think it connects a lot to uh, maybe like dropping out early and having that motivation because I noticed too that with the Hyperloop, it said that you were involved in getting in like some of the sponsorships and the crowdfunding. So I guess like what did you learn about like crowdfunding from that experience, and like how did that set you up for Pogbet?
And it's a pain. Crowdfunding is a real pain. One thing I realized pretty early, and this is a paradox that I still grapple with today, in that when you're looking for checks or when you're looking for capital for investment, I feel like there's this strange dynamic where if you're asking for a check for, 500 bucks, $1,000, something like that, you have to go through almost the same amount of diligence and work that you have to go through to get a check of $500,000 or $1 million. And oftentimes, I feel like it's oftentimes easier to raise those bigger checks so long as you know the right folks. And that's the tough part, of course. That's the little asterisk that you have to throw in there because like if you don't know the right people, then you're not gonna get to that final stage. But it is remarkable. So if you're crowdfunding like dozens of checks of smaller sizes, a couple $100, $1,000, something like that, you have to put in a lot of work. Like it's 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 tough. it's tough, and you have to make sure all of the messaging is watertight. The kind of like the branding all around is like, coherent. It makes sense. It tells a narrative that is powerful, that people care about. Oftentimes, it was friends and family members of people working in and around Hyperloop, or at least the college team that we were in, and so we had to make it very personal. Uh, you know, appealing to people's emotions is I feel like the best way of interacting with them in any meaningful capacity outside uh, of of fundraising or within fundraising too. So it was definitely a chore, but it was a lot of fun. Definitely learned a lot, and man, it was an adventure. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, I think so many people now they see how difficult it can be to raise like a friends and family round, or even like a smaller round. So I know even just with personal experience or people that I know, they'll end up raising like probably way more money than they kind of need. But
yeah,
just because I guess like you said, that's almost easier than if you wanted to go with those smaller sizes or something like a little bit more manageable or smaller, I guess. Um, but I thought that's pretty interesting that like you decided to drop out of Berkeley after being like very involved in some of those projects, and seeming like you had a very interesting experience. So what led you to dropping out? Like why did you decide to do that?
for me personally, it was a matter of a couple things. So, first of all, because we were in the sports betting space, it was time sensitive. The Supreme Court had overturned a bill called PASPA, which had essentially previously banned sports betting in the US. And we realized with that legislation, we could ride this wave of momentum that sports betting would carry within the country. And it dawned on me that it's like, hey, listen, like this next year is going to be super important. We have to get in on the ground floor. Obviously, there's going to be the big players like FanDuel, DraftKings, MGM, like all those really big folks who we're going to have to compete with. But if we can make a product that's really killer, like I think that it's viable. And that was kind of the peak of my ambition. After that, we raised a little bit of money, and it was great. And then it started to hit us that okay, this is gonna be an uphill challenge all the way. And then once we finally had a product built, unfortunately, the circumstances within the world kind of told us like, hey, stop this. There just weren't sports to bet on for like 6 months or closer to a year maybe. And so that's kind of when it hit us that we're like, okay, we have to reckon with everything that we've built and try to make the most of the situation that isn't ideal. Um, and let's see where we can go with this because we have tech that's cool. We have tech that works like pretty well. And how can we adapt this to something that, we actually really care about? And that's when we shifted into the streaming and esports space where we saw these really cool communities blossoming on Twitch. And it I didn't wanna go back to college in the middle of, like, Zoom University. Uh, I might as well have been going to, like, University of Phoenix online. No disrespect to University of Phoenix. I'm originally from Arizona, although I don't think University of Phoenix is even based there anymore, but it doesn't matter. Point aside, it's like I didn't wanna go to Zoom University. Um, so I was like, "We gotta double down and keep this thing going, keep the ship afloat." And again, it was definitely a journey trying to hold everything together at the same time and make sure that, we didn't go belly up, but uh, now we have a new product that's launched where streamers can better engage our audiences and building out some pretty cool tools using some Solana infrastructure that, man, it's fun. It's fun building this space because so much of it is brand new. The documentation on pretty much everything sucks, and we get to be the ones who write it. So it's awesome.
Right. Yeah, and I think you kind of realize like once you're more committing to it that you need to take like the full leap of faith. And I'm sure it like once you start your own project and you're raising money and everything's moving really quickly, you're kind of like, maybe school doesn't seem as interesting at that point,
Yeah.
especially on Zoom.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so I guess like, and I think it's a pretty cool story too because I think it sounds like you were maybe in a more crowded market in the sports betting industry with your initial product, and then COVID kind of caused you to realize that there was this huge opportunity in live streaming, and being able to like gamble on games like as the live streamers are playing it and being way more engaged with their audiences. Which is something that I assume has substantially fewer competitors, or it might be completely like original. Like maybe there aren't any competitors for that specific market. So like, how was the experience in pivoting from sports betting to the online streaming, like gambling infrastructure that you're building now?
It's super, super, super interesting. And the reason why I say that is because when you talk with streamers and you talk with their communities, you say, hey, look, your favorite streamer is playing in a tournament. We are building infrastructure for you to now bet on their gameplay. And if you win, great, you win some money. If you lose, that money goes to the streamer. So it serves as supplemental income for that streamer. They get it, like, right off the bat. They hear the name of the company, Pogbet, and they're like, "Oh, that's streamer betting. I get it." The word "pog" is a common phrase within the streaming world. Came from an emote that, like, it's kinda like an emoji almost, but,
PogChamp.
it yeah, PogChamp, there's poggers. It's this slang phrase. Some people say that it means play of the game. It generally just means, like, good. And it's kind of turned into a meme at this point. It's very meme-ish, but people in the streaming world get it, like, and they like it. They like the idea of not only being able to bet, but, if they lose, like, that's okay. It's supporting the streamer who they already love. But then on the other side of it, there's this very clear-cut dichotomy because the oftentimes the venture world and a lot of the traditional sports betting world see it as just this big monolith of esports and gaming as a whole. And they don't understand what the difference is between esports and streamers. And this is something that, like, I've had to reckon with myself, but, like, good lord, trying to explain it to someone who, like, first of all, doesn't understand esports because, respectfully, they may be, like, a little bit older and not necessarily super familiar with the world of esports. Trying to say there are people who sit in front of a camera 8, 10, 12 hours a day playing a video game and command audiences of literally millions of people around the world and make millions of dollars every single year from, subscriptions, which are their audience is literally just paying to watch, like, ad-free experiences and support the streamer. Like, that's crazy. That
Right.
is insane, and it's this new medium of digital communities that we've never seen before because it just wasn't possible, and trying to explain that to folks is tough. Like,
Yeah.
who don't understand this space natively, that's tough, and
I
so
mean,
when I
even for
say what we
myself,
do.
I would say like I'm not as involved
Yeah,
necessarily with watching live streams, and
yeah,
it honestly it just blows my mind how much it's been expanding without I'm barely even aware. Or like if you're not actively involved in these communities, I feel like you're completely disconnected from it because like I
yeah,
come from a space where people watching me on YouTube, like they would even maybe complain or dislike the fact that they have to watch ads for that. And then you transition to a place where someone's live streaming for hours on end every single day, and people are willingly donating, like giving money to the streamers, subscribing, paying for it. It's like a completely different mindset. It's really
mhm,
interesting.
it's brand new. It's this, man, I don't think we've ever seen an interaction like this in human history where it's so, parasocial. Yet the streamer, like, cares. The streamer asks about each individual in their audience, but it's impossible at scale to care about, like, every single person and know every single person's story. Um, but every single one of those people within the community, like, know and love and revere that streamer, and it's cool for sure. It's wild. There's a lot of experimentation going on, and it's fun because you see new stuff every single day. So I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean going back to the fact that people are so willing to like donate or support the streamers, I think the whole like integrating gambling aspect into that is really cool because then you're basically gamifying something that people like. There's already a very active market for people who are willing to give money to the streamers, and this just
Yeah.
makes it more interactive. Like probably increases the retention rate for the viewers of the streamers, so it's more
Yeah.
beneficial to the streamer, and then also more fun for the active like participant, the person watching the stream too, which is awesome. However, like one thing I would say, and I think I saw this like on you like at your speech at a previous Solana conference, like you kind of mentioned that gamers tend to kind of like hate like Web3 or NFTs
Yeah.
because whenever they hear about it, I feel like there's just been a very negative connotation with all like the people kind of just trying to get cash grabs. Or yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like repair that needs to go in terms of the Web3 market integrating with gaming. Um, So like what do you think about that? Like how do you think that can evolve over time?
I think it's so first of all, I think that we need to say like, listen, there's been a lot of really am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Okay, there's been a lot of really shitty NFT projects
Oh
that
yeah.
have been uh, just like man, they've grabbed all the headlines within gaming. You see some members of like FaZe Clan getting kicked out because they'll pump and dump coins. There are large influencers that put out NFT projects that ultimately just dump on users, and like it's sad. It's super sad because if there's some sort of influential figure who doesn't actually care about their audience or the individuals within their community, and they don't have those daily interactions, like yeah, they're gonna do exploitative stuff just like that, like releasing a product that clearly doesn't work. And it could be anything like that. And so it's so easy now with NFTs and with shitcoins to like just exploit the fuck out of their audience, man. It's
Yeah.
crazy how much money they can make so quickly. And if you can do that, man, yeah, hey, why not? If you don't care, yeah, go for it. But that's terrible for the streamers who genuinely care about their audiences and want to provide the best possible experiences and care not just about the audience as a whole, but about the individuals who make up that audience. Like that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. I think going forward, I mean, first of all, like NFTs need a rebrand within gaming. Like if Ubisoft came in tomorrow and said, like, hey, look, so I know we messed up with like the whole NFT thing, but instead of that, like, what if across all of our different games that we offer as a company, we are now going to put up a standard such that like if you purchase a skin within one game, it transfers over to the other. And, like, obviously, there's a lot of examples in which that doesn't work. Like, and I've seen a lot of gamers point that out, and I think that that's 100% valid. I'm not gonna take a Warzone skin and play with that in Fortnite, or
Mhm.
vice versa. Like, that doesn't make sense. Or like a gun, and it's not gonna go across both games. But, like, for example, in FIFA, if all those FIFA cards that I had purchased in like FIFA 18 had been able to transfer to some of the new FIFAs, like I'd still be playing Ultimate Team. Like I think there were a couple years where I sunk hundreds, if not over $1,000 into Ultimate Team. And now it's we're on FIFA 22, I guess, and like I have nothing in there. And that sucks. Like that really sucks. So if there was some sort of mechanism where we could rebrand the idea of being able to purchase something, own it, and being able to like transfer it across games or across generations of games, something like that. Like, man, that's huge. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see that soon, but I haven't seen any major corporation do that effectively yet. But I think it will happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like so far it's been more exploitative by people
Yeah.
who are just kind of like hearing about the technology and kind of seeing the money that they can make rather
Yep.
than being pitched towards gamers in a way where it can like just improve the experience overall, which is really like where the technology should go in the long term, and I'm sure it will end up going. And I think like even for myself, like on the podcast and just my own personal research, even into different niches in crypto, like that's why I've always been very hesitant going deeper into NFTs or GameFi projects, just because I think like a lot of the time it is more exploitative, at least at the current stage, just because of how early it is, rather than like something that's like a net positive for the community overall. So like that's why I thought Pogbet was really cool, because it was more of a it felt like something that was a new idea, that didn't feel like some of those. It was more building a new feature, something that's like a net positive, rather than like some of these other projects where it's like, do you really need to have like an NFT in this game, or
Yeah.
it didn't really make
Yeah.
sense. Um, so I guess you mentioned that you're building Pogbet on Solana. So like, what attracted you to Solana? And I also wasn't sure. Do you plan on keeping Pogbet off chain, or do you plan on putting most of the logic on chain, or is it like an optional type of thing? How is that going to work?
Yeah. So what initially attracted us to Solana was about a year ago. What's it? It's like mid-April right now. So yeah, about a year ago, a little over a year ago, when NFTs were really starting to boom, and everyone OpenSea was in the headlines of every, New York Times, Wall Street Journal article, like everything was NFTs. Um, we were like, okay, what if we made trading cards for streamers and sent out like, I don't know, put up like 8 on OpenSea, kept one for Pogbet and gave one to the streamer. such that, we would be financially incentivized to make sure that thing holds value. And so we did exactly that. And we told the audience, hey, look, we got some trading cards up on OpenSea. If you want to purchase them, go ahead. There's only 8 that are out there. We hold one, streamer holds one. And they were super gung-ho. They were super into it. They're like, this is cool. A lot of them went and they bought Ethereum and they went to OpenSea and then they went to purchase it. And initially, we'd put the price at $30 or whatever the equivalent was in Ethereum, but it was about $30. And when they went to purchase it, they were like, Eric, why the fuck is this $60? You said it was $30. Like, that's crazy. We don't get it. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I put it up for $30. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so when I went to check, it was $30. But when you went to actually check out and like confirm the transaction, the gas fees were doubling the actual cost. And it was like, no one wanted to do that. And I don't blame them. For the normal person, like $30 in gas fees is a lot, especially when it doubles the price. When you're talking about, JPEGs that cost 100 grand, $30 is nothing in comparison. But even still, that's a lot of money just for
It adds up.
shipping, if you will. Like that's crazy. No one's gonna pay that. And so we realized, like, listen, this if we want to do anything at scale on chain, like we have to figure this shit out right now because no one wants to pay gas fees. No one wants transactions to take, 10, 20, 30 seconds. They want it instantly and they want it for free. And like that's Amazon, like Amazon realized that was shipping. They're like, hey, people want this shit yesterday and they want to make sure it's like free. Even if we have to mark up the original price, like it doesn't matter. Like that's the way that people consume. And it holds over with digital goods, like I would say even more. Because if you are essentially just giving someone like if for all intents and purposes a JPEG, you know, that should be instant and that should be pretty much free. So we played around with a bunch of different chains and we realized that Solana just had some of the coolest developers on it that we had ever met. And not to say that like Ethereum, Polygon, like any of those other chains don't have like really cool devs because they do, but some of the Solana devs we met were just weird, wacky, had crazy, outlandish ideas, and we loved that. We loved that. We could see this blossoming ecosystem, and we realized, like, man, this is a big deal. Like, when the network is at 100%, like this thing works fast, and this thing works like real cheap, like really, really cheap. And that was cool. That was super cool. So we did some early tests with that, and made the decision then and there, like, okay, this is a big deal. Like this is the next big thing for us. And then in terms of what we're building on and off chain, the actual betting itself for right now is off chain. And that's for a couple different reasons. In the gaming space, if you have a cheater, if you lag out of a game, like anything like that, if someone joins your game publicly and like messes up like the match, like there has to be some sort of immediate mechanism for both us, like the house, if you will, and the streamer to be able to refund betters or hold that over until the next game. There has to be some sort of like decisive control over that. And there's an argument to be made to say like, hey, like, we want everything on chain. Um, everything needs to be in the public eye, all of that. But I don't think everything needs to be on chain, Like there's I think a lot of stuff on chain is good. There's a lot of really good practical use cases for it. But for the sake of making sure that the user experience is top tier, that's what I care most about. And as long as the user feels like they're getting a really good experience and like they're always getting paid out fairly, all of that, like that's all I care about. I want to make sure they're having a good time. I want to make sure the streamers feel like they're having a good time and giving their audiences like something worthwhile to actually engage with. Because, if we don't, we're not a real product then. And
Yeah.
in addition to that, we're also building out some NFTs on Solana. And some tools in and around donations, which we haven't fully released just yet, but I'm excited. I can tease them a little bit. Some of the NFTs will definitely be still along the lines of streamer trading cards. We're going to be pulling in on-chain subscription badges, which we think are super cool because now we're going to be able to create like digital gated communities, and those will serve as like digital tickets, if you will, for like any sort of virtual event. And in addition to that, we'll have some pretty cool donation tools for on-stream donations, which I think we'll be able to demo that in a little bit. But we built it out over the past week in Miami at the Hacker House, and man, it's some real cool stuff.
Sounds super exciting. Yeah, and I totally agree with you too. Like, you don't necessarily need to force everything on chain if it's not going to be as effective as it could be off chain. And also, I think there are like a ton of different like kind of like edge cases and weird things that could happen with like the streamer like gambling.
Yeah,
Um, because like yeah, like you said, like the game, something wrong could go in the game. There could be like some form of malpractice if some streamer like tried to do something funny, you know, and that's all way more effective if it's handled by like a centralized party who can deal with whether that was like malpractice or not, and handle the users in the correct way. And also, you mentioned like the Solana ecosystem and like how cool the Solana ecosystem is. And honestly, I was very surprised because I've been to some other conferences. I've been to like a Bitcoin event a while ago. I went to
hmm
Ethereum Denver. And I think like the developers and people that I met most recently at the Solana Hacker House was definitely like it felt completely different than a lot of the other
yeah,
crypto events I've been to. And like you
yeah,
said, it really Solana really does attract like a very unique set of developers and builders that the other chains don't necessarily have. So I think that's really cool to see. And honestly, it surprised me because I wasn't too involved in Solana prior to that. And now, like you know, I want to get more involved in Rust and potentially see like what I could build on there.
yeah.
Now, I know that with Pogbet, you do work when you mentioned like you're testing some donation systems and other products that you're building. I know that you also work with a streamer who's like I believe like part of the team. So has that
Yeah.
been like a huge advantage to have someone who's already like in the space? Is he a co-founder? Is he what's the relationship like? How do you bounce off ideas off of him, and like what advantages do you have to having someone who's actively in the space being on the team?
Yeah, the gentleman in question, his name is Enrique, although his public Twitch name is E-Train. And man, let me tell you, I went to high school with this guy. That's how I met him.
That's
And
awesome.
that's it. Frankly, it was super lucky. E is such a good guy. Um, and he's been in and around streaming for like almost a decade at this point, whether he's streaming himself or he was one of the OG folks in Nick Merck's community. Who, for those of you who are familiar with Nick, he's a really big Apex streamer. Although I think he gained a lot of his popularity in the Call of Duty Warzone days. Um, I think Fortnite as well, of course. I think a lot of streamers were built on top of Fortnite. Even last night, Ian and I were playing a little bit of Fortnite, and man, that game's still so much fun. Um, but yeah, no, he's an incredible guy. He puts on streams generally, once a week, sometimes twice a week. I think we'll start ramping it up a little bit more here as we're getting ready to release out of beta. But we'll just throw new tools at him that we build out on the app and say, hey, demo this on stream. And it's cool. Like, he has this incredible community that is kind of become like the Pogbet community, and they love testing stuff. They love demoing things. Of course, we try to reward them and throw them some incentives here and there to make sure like, hey, they're taken care of. Um, but it's so much fun working not only with him but his community that he's built out. A lot of the people who are in the MFAM, which is like the name of Nick Merck's community, and a bunch of like the moderators in there. They're all such like good people and like genuine folks who hang out on Twitter, Discord, in games, out of games, like anywhere. They're just all over the place in all these digital spaces, and just constantly want to play games with each other, hang out, have a good time, and of course play some bets here and there. And so it's a lot of fun and it's cool. They're super receptive to some of the new stuff that we're doing too, because like we were talking about earlier, like a lot of these gaming communities are really anti NFT, anti crypto, anti Web3. And again, like I said, I get it. Like, it makes a lot of sense. Um, but these folks, like, they're receptive to it. They're super receptive. I'll talk with them either individually or in groups, and they'll be like, "Yeah, we're willing to try that out. We're willing to try something new because we're trying to build everything in public as best as we can. And so when we do fuck up, it's cool." Like, I'm not the part of fucking up, but like the part of like where they're like, "Yeah, we get it. It's okay. We trust you with our money. just, make sure you make it right sort of thing, and, we'll come back next time, and, with a smile on our faces. And that's super cool. That's an advantage of building in public for sure. It's been a
Yeah.
huge lesson.
Yeah, because you're building it with a community, and I think that's an amazing feeling too. Because you probably feel like you're already actively seeing like the product market fit. Like you're seeing these people, they want the product, and they're willing to help even you build it and curate it over time. I think that's awesome, and that's like one of the best feelings. Like whenever you're working on launching a project.
Yeah.
So I know something else, like another feature that you guys have built into Pogbet, is this machine learning model that can automatically generate odds for the streamers. So if they're playing a specific game or something, um, then the model can come in on the back end from the streamer system, and it can determine the odds for a specific game, and the house will take the other side of the bet. And then people who are watching the stream can then take the bet, either if they're going to win or lose the game or something like that. Um, so like, what has been the process in creating this ML model? And like, what are some of the difficulties or the things that you've learned from trying to tackle this?
Thankfully, I had I think I got really lucky again. I have a bunch of really smart people around me who are really damn good with machine learning. And so I had a number of good resources at our fingertips, and frankly, it was a matter of getting enough data such that we could train some of these models. And thanks to some of the smart folks around me, we were able to build out some really cool, like real time models where, like, you play League of Legends, and in real time, you can get odds generated on how many kills you're going to get, how many deaths you're going to get, um, creep score, like all of that stuff. Like it's super, super, super powerful. And of course, as you get more data, um, and like good data too, not necessarily just more data, but like really good data, especially recent data, like we can build out really accurate models. And it's kind of scary sometimes where it'll be like within like one kill, or like within
Wow.
like, I don't know, like 3% of the creep score that was predicted, like super accurate, like incredible stuff. And in terms of building it out, it's been challenging because obviously if you're building out a machine learning model for football, for example, American football, it's not going to be the same as if you're building out a model for tennis. Like they are fundamentally different sports with different goals, different outcomes, different scoring. One is timed, one's not. Like there's a lot that goes into it. And it's the same thing for games. Thankfully, there's a lot more crossover when you're dealing with like MOBAs, like, League of Legends and like Dota versus like an FPS title like CSGO and Valorant, or for a battle royale like Warzone and Fortnite. But even once you get into those, like there are so many like modes within those games where it's like Fortnite just introduced a new mode without building. And that completely changes the game. And you have so many different play styles now where you didn't have them coming in and exploiting little pieces of the game here and there. And it completely changes the way that you have to like adapt a machine learning model. So it's tricky for sure. But thankfully, like I said, I'm surrounded by some really smart folks who can make sure that we try to take all of that into account. But man, the ML stuff is super cool though. I love that because it's like, how can we predict the future?
Yeah.
And how can we convince other people that we know the future, or that they know the future better than the computers? And that's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that sounds super interesting and really fun. It seems like a really cool challenge. And also, yeah, I do think it's really helpful to have that feature where like you can bet against the house. Like in the cases where maybe people don't want to take the other side of a specific bet or something like that. Like it's a huge opener for like liquidity into the gambling that people might want to take on.
Yeah.
And so I know there are like a bunch of different ways kind of that you could go about like integrating this into Twitch. Like I know you could maybe do like an extension, like a browser extension or something that integrates with Twitch. You could maybe do like an app or something, or have like a separate website. So like, what interface do you think would be the most successful with integrating like gambling on the stream, and like what's the easiest way for people to interact with it?
At the end of the day, we want to make Pogbet a destination for people to ultimately like go to, spend time on, um, host really interesting tools for streamers to, of course, make more revenue and better engage their audiences. So we've built out a standalone app where we can integrate these streams directly into the app. They can watch the streams on the app and bet on the app at the same time. Like that is super cool. But of course, we recognize like that's not going to be 100% of users. Uh, these communities oftentimes want to watch on Twitch. There's a number of reasons for that, but I won't get too deep into it. And so we do think that going forward, we'll probably need to have some sort of extension, maybe even native in Twitch if we can work out something with Twitch that makes sense for both parties.
Yeah.
We've talked with Twitch briefly in the past, and they've seemed receptive to it. Frankly, of course, gambling is a very taboo industry, and I think that there's a lot of people who handle gambling in a very exploitative manner. And
And the
frankly, that's just
regulations for them would
yeah, and the
probably be difficult too.
exactly. Yeah, a lot of regulations around it. I mean, ultimately, they're owned by Amazon, which is a publicly traded company. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, we're not trying to exploit anyone. We're just trying to build cool tools for streamers to like have some fun. And we think that there is a possibility in the future of some sort of a partnership with Twitch, and that extends to YouTube as well. Facebook gaming, which is weird to say because I mean, I don't know any Facebook gaming streamers personally,
Yeah.
and it's weird because the numbers from Facebook gaming look huge, but that's again a whole nother conversation. But yeah, at the end of the day, we just want to give streamers the best, most seamless experience for engaging their audiences, um, experimenting with fun little tools here and there, and of course, facilitating the betting on their gameplay. So if that happens on our app, great. If that happens natively on Twitch, on YouTube, on Facebook, whatever it is, great. We'll build out the tools such that the streamers have the best experience possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be huge, obviously, if you guys had like a partnership with Twitch,
Yeah,
or like some native integration. I mean, then it opens
that'd be
up so
wild.
many different avenues. I mean, that's
Yeah,
and it does seem like it could be a decent like acquisition target for one of these platforms if they're looking to do that natively. So like I wonder because I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, like with the streamer that you currently work with, and like kind of the beta process that you've been doing. So how do you plan on like rolling this out and attracting like other streamers to join the to join Pogbet and integrate the software into their streams? Like what's the process for attracting a lot of this talent? Because I think like I guess like a lot of companies kind of struggle with how they should go about attracting streamers.
yeah.
Like I know some platforms like went the route of having like these gigantic contracts with streamers, like exclusive contracts to join specific platforms, or different things like that. Like, do you see this as something that will more just grow out organically initially, or do you have like a plan to sign on specific streamers? Like, what's your launch process plan?
I consider E-Train to be like the streamer's streamer. So like he has so many good relationships with so many of these incredibly talented streamers with like wonderful thriving communities. And that's a huge advantage for us. Frankly, that's our secret weapon. Um, we've had a number of like decently large streamers come to us and say like, "Hey, like I'd love to be part of this. This is cool. My audience already like, they've heard about Pogbet or they've heard about similar concepts to Pogbet, but they've never seen it implemented. And now I would like to be a part of this." And we think that that's super cool. That organic growth, that's just word of mouth growth, like that is awesome. Growing in these like social spaces, especially, like so much of it is just how viral you can make things and how sticky you can make that virality, which is a terrible sentence. That's a very venture sentence right there. Like, oh yeah, how sticky can you make the virality? But like at the end of the day, you want to make sure that something like, it makes a splash and people care about it. And people care about it for a long time too. And if it's something where, again, they can like throw even a dollar on like someone in a tournament who they watch like every day for hours every day, all of a sudden you have that dollar riding on that guy, or lady, I should say, playing in that tournament, and like your eyes are glued to the screen. Like it is a completely different experience than you just sitting back and watching and of course rooting for your streamer to do well. But
Mhm.
now even if it can be the smallest amount, we've done so much testing with this, and even the smallest amount, it could be 50 cents. Like it is it's hard to fully articulate how much it changes the experience, and that's super cool. And so when that happens, and when they tell the streamer about, hey, I had 50 cents writing on you, or like maybe one of your teammates or something, like all of a sudden that creates this viral loop mechanism where ultimately like the streamer hears about it and wants to be more involved with it. And that's super powerful in and of itself. And then of course beyond that, like we want to make sure streamers are fairly compensated. We want to make sure that they get contracts that represent like the value that they bring to Pogbet, and of course to their respective communities in and around Pogbet. We believe that a rising tide will rise all boats, all ships. What's that expression? It's something like that.
Mhm.
All these boats are going to rise though, and all these streamers are boats. We want to be the tide that brings them all up. And at the end of the day, as long as we're helping out these streamers and again adding value to the communities that they represent, like that's some cool stuff. And
Yeah.
it's a matter of organic. It's a matter of contracts. It's a matter of a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like once the streamers, if you guys get like really good statistics on like increased retention for the viewership, if streamers can see that their viewership is more engaged, people are going to be watching for longer periods of time. It's another source of revenue for the streamer. Like it kind of becomes a thing of like, why wouldn't I integrate this into my streaming process? So I think like that's a huge thing, and I think the revenue share is also like obviously an amazing idea because then it like platforms who have revenue share to the creators, that's just like an automatic organic marketing mechanism because then
Hmm.
streamers can say, I'm making all this money on this platform, and it's improving my stream in these many different ways. And then other streamers are going to say, well, I should try this for my audience as well. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so where do you see like Pogbet by the end of this year? And like what is your current timeline for launch? Because I know you mentioned like you're in beta and you're also working on some of these other features. So what's the timeline looking like?
Yeah, I frankly don't know. Sometimes I wonder what the timeline looks like for the end of the month because stuff changes so quickly. Sometimes we'll have a massive streamer come to us and say, "Hey, look, I want to demo something on my stream." And I'll be like, "Hold on, let's. I got to make sure that this little piece of text that we just built out works first, and then we'll work with E to make sure everything works. Then we'll work with them, and it's a complicated process. But at the end of the year, I want to make sure that we're putting on frequent, big tournaments for these streamers to play in. I mean, these streamers thrive on content. Like content is king. If you can have great, meaningful, impactful content in or around like tournaments where there's a competitive environment that incentivizes you, the streamer, not to cheat or throw games or anything like that, like that is super cool because then that content extends beyond just the live stream. It goes to the YouTube channel. It goes to the TikTok, the 10-second clips that you throw on TikTok. It goes to Instagram. It goes to everywhere. It can go viral on Twitter. So like if we can get little pieces of content, really try to prioritize the not only the engagement side of Pogbet, but also our ability to host events where streamers can make like great content for them to, of course, reach new audiences across various social media platforms. Like that's super cool, and we definitely want to use some of the money that we're going to raise to uh, put on these tournaments that in theory could be like new just content machines. We also want to sign streamers to exclusive contracts. Frankly, if I'm being honest, like there isn't anyone out there that's doing what Pogbet is doing the way that we're doing it, which is kind of a nuanced way of saying that. But
Mhm.
frankly, there aren't big companies dealing with live streamers right now. This company is dealing with like tournaments for like esports teams, traditional organized esports teams, FaZe Clan, 100 Thieves, all those guys. But like no one's working with streamers in a meaningful way outside of like just sponsors, but that's not like betting, that's not web3 stuff. Like there's a lot of open ground that needs to be covered, and I think that we're going to try a lot of things by the end of the year. I want to make sure by the end of the year we've built out a bunch of products that quite frankly have failed, because if we're not building out stuff that like doesn't work or that hasn't been iterated on, like I mean what's the point? We got to try as much stuff as we can because there's just so much open room for growth in this space that like I want to build some really just crazy stuff, see what works, and then keep building on top of that. Because I think that again, there's a lot of room in this space, and if we can capture that, and if we can let the streamers capture that, like that'll be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the creator economy is rapidly expanding, and I think kind of like what you were mentioning, like there aren't that many companies or projects that are specifically targeting streamers, which is weird because it's such a rapidly expanding space, and I think it really just comes from like the lack of understanding that a lot of people who are not involved in like maybe watching streamers or being a streamer themselves, like they just don't have that perspective of like, well, what are the opportunities that streamers could have. And it's such like a wide space for opportunity, especially with how much it's been expanding. And of course, COVID, although initially it was like a negative for your initial project, like Better before the pivot, now it's like a huge positive because it's completely changed the trajectory of streaming and all of these platforms that you're now specifically targeting and building for. So, like, what this is a question that we like to ask every single one of our guests. But like, what advice do you have for founders that you wish you would have known before starting Pogbet and Better and before getting into all of this? Like, what advice do you wish you would have known that maybe that surprised you or anything like that? A hurdle that you didn't expect?
I think being a founder is tough because man, you like when you're out in the public, generally speaking, it's because you either did something really damn cool or really damn shitty. You're either, WeWork CEO, right before WeWork goes public, you're doing dumb stuff, you're getting all the negative headlines, or you're like Steve Jobs holding up the iPhone for the first time. That's the duality of a founder. So you have some really high highs and some really low lows. And if you don't have a support network around you that really cares about you, like, man, you're gonna have a rough time. And there's a very good chance that you're not gonna succeed. And if you do, more power to you. But like, damn, it's a lot easier if you have people who like genuinely care about you. And even before this call, like I was on a FaceTime call with one of my best friends. And like it's nice to just have people who ask, like, how are you? Like in a meaningful way, not just like, hey, how you doing? But like how are you? How are you like going about the process? How mentally are you holding up? Emotionally, like what's got you up? What's got you down? Um, and that's a big deal. You can't underestimate how important having that support network is. And it's one thing that some of my advisors have told me, and I've been like, yeah, yeah, whatever. But like, no, like real talk, like go talk with like, your friends, your family, people who like genuinely care about you and tell them about your issues. And I think it's hard. It's oftentimes really hard as a founder to express, hey, I just built this product and it failed. And like that stinks. Most people don't have that same lived experience. But if you have people who genuinely care about you, like they'll be able to empathize at least in some capacity, and that's huge. That's super huge. Also, build that shit in public too, because if you fail in public and you're honest with your audience, with your community, with your users, whoever it is, like, and you've been transparent the entire time, and you've had good intentions, like they'll they'll offer support and they'll be there for you, at least in some, again, in some capacity, and that's huge. You can't underestimate that network, that level of support that is so immensely important for a task like building something from the ground up.
Yeah. And I think a lot of founders would say that like founding a project can be kind of lonely because kind of like you
Yeah.
were saying, like a lot of people maybe won't understand the issues that you're tackling or the things that you're going through. Because yeah, just being a founder in the first place is already kind of a rare thing. But I think kind of like a commonality that that we've kind of seen throughout your story so far is that like at each and every step you've kind of integrated a lot of other people that you already have relationships with into your project, like whether it be raising money through friends and family, working with a streamer who is your friend since like high school, or even having like those connections to people who were very involved in machine learning that you've been able to leverage for the product itself. Like there are a lot
Hmm.
of different ways that you've integrated those existing relationships into the company, which I think is huge, and it's like it's a massive advantage as opposed to just like maybe not talking about it with your friends or being like a lonely founder and not having that network of people that you can talk to.
Yeah.
So I guess as we wrap up, like where can people learn more about Pogbet and what you're building, or maybe if you want to get involved, test out the product, what can they do in order to do that?
Best place to follow us is on Twitter at Pogbet app. And if you follow us there, generally we'll tweet out when we're going live. We put on beta events. Right now we're doing it about every Friday, sometimes every other Friday. But as we move out of beta, we'll have streamers full time streaming almost 24/7 across Pogbet. But if you want to get more involved in Pogbet, tell your favorite streamer, hey, I want to bet on your streams and I want to do it through Pogbet. And I wanna donate in cool ways. I want my sub badge on chain. There's some really cool stuff that I think can add value to the like community member experience. So tell your favorite streamer about us. And of course, feel free to follow me on Twitter at Eric Hovagim. I generally just retweet stuff from Pogbet and tweet about Pogbet and venture stuff, startup stuff. But yeah, feel free to follow us on Twitter.
Cool. Well, if you've enjoyed this episode of Venture Node, make sure to subscribe on all platforms: Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, everywhere where you watch your podcasts. And Eric, thank you so much for coming on and having this amazing discussion. I think it was super interesting.
Thanks so much for having me, Adrian. It was a pleasure.